And I want to introduce Jeannie Bruenning now. And she's an author, publisher, and playwright. And I found out tonight she was very involved with SLO NightWriters a number of years ago now. She began writing after moving from an urban life in Chicago to the coastal life of Pismo Beach in 2008. She has 9 books to her credit, with a boutique publishing company, A Silver Thread, her newfound passion for developing stage plays has her busy creating new worlds and characters that will someday live on the stage. And welcome, Jeannie. Thank you.
I already got a prize, so I think we can just right? So yes, my name is Jeannie, and I'm a writer. It's taken me many years to admit that fact. But as a writer, I need to know my audience. So who here has written a book? Who has published a book? Awesome. Who has a manuscript in the works? Where's our poets? Awesome. Bloggers? Yeah. That is writing. As I said, it's taken me many years, and it was just recently I was actually interviewing for the job that I have now. I write the copy for a catalog for a marketing company and their promotional emails. And I was sitting in this interview. It was a panel interview. If you've ever had those, there's like 7 people around the table all asking the questions. And someone said, Jeannie, how many books have you written? And I went silent because I was counting. And someone at the table said, 9, I Googled her. And my first thought was, ooh, that's impressive. You should hire me. But my next thought was, Jeannie, you didn't know that. That wasn't in your mind. And why not? Then I was at a doctor's visit. This was within this last year. And it was that first visit, you know, we get to know each other. She said, are you working? And I told her what I do. And she said, oh, that sounds great. Like, what experience do you need for a job like that? And I said, oh, nothing. And I wanted to slap myself because in that one sentence, I had taken 10 to 12 years of work at honing this skill and creating characters and writing books and that whole process down to, it's nothing. It's not important. It's simple. And I think we as writers have that issue. We have this standard of something that someday we'll achieve, and then we can call ourselves a writer, right? My question to you is, what is that benchmark for you? And where did that come from? I am many things. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a grandmother. I'm over 60. All those things roll off of my tongue. But those words, I am a writer, get stuck in my throat. The first time I said it, when someone said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a writer. And they went, oh, that's cool. And just went on with life. Like there was no lightning. There was no thunder. It was just, oh, that's cool. Let's get to know each other. And I love that. One of the things we have to do with this thing that's called writing is understand that we are creatives. Well, that's another thing that's way out there, because creatives are designers and painters. Creative people are actors and singers. Does writing really qualify as being a creative? And oh, most certainly. Those other things couldn't happen without the writer creating something for them to say or read or do. So as a writer, I know that you have the ability to take a thought and put it on paper for somebody to read and understand. That's an amazing ability. That isn't something that everybody can do. You are a storyteller. You paint pictures with words. Think of that. You paint pictures with words. And you create something that has never existed before. and you create something that nobody else could create. How many times have you heard, I had this idea for a book, but I'm sure everyone's had that idea, or somebody's already written it. Well, they haven't, because you haven't written it. It's your perspective. It's what you put into it that makes it different. So I do have a small publishing company called The Silver Thread. It started out because my sisters and I wrote a book. My husband's in the publishing world, the big publishing houses, and I said, so how are we going to get this published? He said, you're not. I went, oh. So I started a company and just went through the process and published a few books, and then had some friends that wanted some publishing. But in that whole process of putting a book together and watching it come to life, the most special day is when the author gets to open that package and see that book. Why? Because it is the manifestation of an idea they had 100 years ago. And then they did something about it. They wrote it, and they edited it, and they rethought it, and they made it better and better. And then we designed it and laid it out and got it published. And now this idea is a thing. So I encourage all of you, no matter what you're writing, you gotta print it somewhere so it exists. If you have 25 notebooks at home with all your handwriting scribbles about books you're going to write, start writing them and then print them somewhere. Someday, my grandkids are going to look at the bookshelf and go, Grandma wrote that? Yeah. Would I know that if I hadn't published it? No. Put it in print. Make it something, even if it's a handwritten book, leave it behind and make it real. Take that idea and bring it to life. So back to this standard of success that we kind of have in our minds. We need to think through what it is. What do you need to do in order for you to consider yourself a successful writer? There's a really fun exercise. I did it for a month. Pretend you are. Pretend you're already there. Now, don't tell people this because they think you're nuts. But wake up every day with that thought of, oh, I'm a successful author. What would you do differently? Let me tell you, I did a whole lot of things differently. We were at a wedding and they had rented this beautiful home, had this gorgeous stairwell that was going down to the garden. And of course, this was all playing in my head because nobody knew this was going on. And I stood at the top of those stairs and I thought, oh, I'm going down to get my award. And I sashayed down those steps. I'm not sure if anyone was watching, but there were things I realized I was doing that was preventing me from feeling successful as writing. And one of the things we do for those of you who have books is we say, yeah, I wrote a book. It hasn't sold many copies. Somehow that's the success. How many copies? A conversation I have with authors all the time. Do you want to write a book or do you want to sell a book? Those are two different worlds. Writing is over here, selling is over here. And if you think writing is hard, this one is 3 times as hard. The company that I work for, we do the catalog is for books from the big publishing houses. And it's been so interesting for me to watch how they market things. I'm writing copy right now for books that are, the last time it was in our catalog was 2013. They're pulling old material out, giving it new covers and reselling it, giving it life again. But they work diligently on trying to sell books, and they're a company. So if you're having a difficult time selling books, it's okay. It's part of the process. That's just what happens when we have books. The other thing about our creativity is we really need to protect it. We need to protect our creative self, but also our work. The biggest thing is really believing in the process and believing in flow. In that creative world, flow and the process really take you to where you need to go, but you have to trust it. You got to get in the water in your inner tube and let it take you somewhere. If you have it all planned out, again, conversations I have with authors, they'll say, oh, I have a book. I just don't know how I'm going to get it published. I'm like, oh, publishing's easy. I got that figured out. So tell me about your book. And they go through, tell me, give me the details. And I'll say, so where are you in the writing process? Oh, I haven't started yet because I don't know how I'm going to get published. I said, well, the first thing is you got to have a book to get published. We have to start there, but we get ahead of ourselves. We try to figure it out. We're going to go this way and that way. When we allow that creative process and the creative flow to happen, it takes you places you can't imagine now. It's there. If you have an idea, I'm a firm believer that if you have an idea, the universe has it all figured out for you. You just have to keep taking one step at a time and doing what's next. But you'll find out, especially in, hopefully some of you have had this experience in writing, where suddenly it's like an out-of-body experience and your fingers are going faster than your brain. And you're like, who's writing this story? What's going on here? Or a chapter ends and you go, I didn't see that coming. And suddenly you're not the writer, you're the first reader. You're just the vessel that this story is coming through, and you've got the courage to get it down on paper. That's what the process does. That's what flow does. We also have to keep our ideas protected and close to us. Biggest mistakes I've made is sharing my ideas before they were ready to be shared. Because as soon as someone says, oh, that's not going to work, or I don't think that's funny, or that doesn't make sense to me. Now my little idea has a flaw and I'm not free to keep moving on with it. Our daughter is very adventurous and crazy. And for instance, this past week, her 2 goats gave birth to 6 goats and she didn't know they were pregnant. That's the kind of things she gets into. But one day she said, I'm gonna hatch eggs from our chickens. I said, honey, you already have 20 chickens. How many more do you need? But we've never hatched eggs. And I watched the process and it was pretty cool because those eggs have to go in a little incubator. And then they pop out, and they go into another thing, and they keep them warm. And then they get to a bigger size, and they go into a box with a heater. And then they can run around the floor and poop all over. And then they get a little bigger, and we put them outside, but it still needs to have a heat lamp. And eventually, they go into half of the hen house because they have to be protected, but they got to see what life is like in the hen house. And then they open it up, and they go in. I thought, wow, that's exactly what we need to do with our ideas. We need to keep them close until they're ready to be born and shared. In the book, The Artist Way, I was just introduced to that book a couple of years ago, and it was life-changing for me. She says, don't give up the gold. Don't show it. And when you do show it, be very careful who you show it to. Now, this can be family members. My family is full of what I call bubble busters. Here's my idea. That's not going to work. We can't do it that way. I don't get it. I don't think this is important. Hey, let me read you my poem. It'll be wasted on me. I don't like poetry. Oh my gosh, I need a new family. But I used to do it and take their criticism and let it deflate me. Now I'm super careful with who I tell things to. I want to wait until the idea has some legs, until I feel really confident in the idea. And then share it with people who are total encouragers. They need to slop all over you with encouragement because that idea hasn't developed yet. And you have to grow it before you put it in the hen house or it'll get eaten. Even if it poops all over the floor, that's how we deal with it. So how do we deal with criticism? It's rough. One of the things though is we can protect it by setting ourselves up for success. So when you have something you want somebody to read for you and edit and give you feedback, don't make it an open book. Because the people who love you will read it and hand it back and say, oh, it was amazing. And you don't need that kind of feedback. Give them things to think about. Tell me if you get lost in the story, because it makes sense in my head, but if you're reading it and it gets lost, I want to fix that. Give them a sense of they're helping you. Is there a character that you just despise? Is there characters, things that surprise you? What were those things? Give them a list of questions that they're thinking about so that when it comes to giving you that feedback, it's what you need. But you will get criticism on things that you didn't ask for. And again, you have to know your audience. Where are they coming from in saying it? Is this someone who you truly admire their skill and talent? You have to weigh those things out. And for some things, you have to let it go, as hard as that is to do. Even when they say they don't like your idea, and if you really believe in it, you got to keep moving forward to it. Fear is a big one. We all have fear issues. Fear used to be this really nice little thing that kept us safe, and now it consumes us, right? It's just this spoiled, rotten rat of an emotion that stops us from doing things. Elizabeth Gilbert, in her book, Big Magic, which is another great book, she talks about fear and how important it is because it does protect us. And she says the beginning of every project, she has a conversation with fear. She said, listen, we're going on a journey, but I'm driving. You're in the back seat in a seatbelt and you speak up when we're in danger, but that's it. We have to get that under control because it will stop our creative flow. Another one, and I might make enemies, is perfectionism. Perfectionism has no place in the creative process. It will block you every single time. A perfectionist can't write a first draft. A perfectionist has to write a final copy. Well, you can't get to a final copy until you have your first draft. There's a process. Even people, I work with a woman, she's a lovely lady, she is a perfectionist. And there's a block every time we try to do something kind of new, or if she can't control it or see it, she stops the process. But that happens within ourselves as well. I don't know what you do with that. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm a it's good enough kind of person. But it is something that's you're gonna stumble on. It's gonna block you. It's gonna stop you from really trusting that idea of flow and that idea of a process, because you want the perfection. Now, perfectionism in editing, yes. Perfectionism in your layout and design of your book, yes. But in the writing process, it doesn't live. It can't live. It's like water and oil, and the two just don't go together. A couple of years ago, I did a book. It's a poetry book for a man named Charlie Puffer, who owns Puffer's down in Pismo. Charlie is a super creative, amazing guy. I love him to death. If I had a little brother, it would be Charlie. But he had a night of poetry reading, and I thought, oh, I'll go. I didn't know much about poetry, but I thought this would be a fun thing. And I learned there's all kinds of different poetry, and some of it doesn't rhyme. Some of it's called free verse. And it's just this wonderful thing. And I left that meeting going, oh, I think I could do that. So I went home and I started writing, and I can. So I'm going to read you one of mine. This is on those voices in our head, because we all have them. If you have voices in your head, you're not weird. You're creative. It just comes with a package. This is called Voices. The voice of disapproval echoes in my head. Your voice is there, telling me I'm not good enough, that it's my fault, that I'm the one to blame. The sound plays in a loop like a broken record, but there's no one to remove the needle. The voices of shame smother me, preventing me from stepping out. The voices of disappointment stop me from trying. They talk about what should have, could have, but didn't. Though not audible to others, they are deafening to me. I fight them. I try to ignore them, put them in a box and hide them, but they ooze out like warm, sticky glue, clogging up my brain space. I don't know why I listen. I don't know why I care. Yet I wait for someone to pick up the needle and bring it to an end. There's another voice in my head. It's always been there. It's quiet and gentle, easily drowned out. Rarely does it shout and never does it interrupt. I can only hear it in the quiet. Today, as I sat identifying all the other voices and contemplating my demise, I found a piece of quiet. And today, my other voice gently instructed, pick up the needle and get on with it. We have to pick up the needle and just get on with it. Keep moving forward with it. Nice point. Well, thank you. The next part of this creative world is exploring all the other creative elements you have. If you are a writer, you are a creative, which means you have a whole lot of creativity in you. We have a tendency to kind of pigeonhole ourselves, that I just want to do this. And we also think about things like the performing arts. That messes all of our brains. Like, I'm not creative because I'm not on stage. I'm not creative because I can't sing. The performing arts are a world of their own. And this past year, I've had this great opportunity to be with people who've actually been successful in Hollywood and music world. And I've watched them 10 minutes before they get on a tiny little stage in front of 100 people, and they are so filled with anxiety and fear. And I'm like, oh, that's just life. Of anybody, they should be the ones that just walk up there and go, I can do this. I've done it a zillion times. But they're not. It's something we all have. But we need to explore some other creative things. Creativity is hope in our world, which is a pretty magical thing to think you have the ability to create hope with your creativity. And the best visual I know of that, my husband and I raised our kids in the western suburbs of Chicago. And we'd take the train into the city on a regular basis. You'd go through the western suburbs, which are absolutely beautiful. And then you'd kind of get into this industrial park. And then you'd get to Oak Park, which is all these massive mansions. And it's just breathtaking. And then there's this area between there and the city limits, where the houses look totally deserted. Like, does anyone even live here? There's no dogs, there's no life. It was just empty until someone came in and painted a house and planted a tree and put a gate up and put a swing in the backyard. And then someone else did it, and someone else did it. They were just using their creative powers to change their houses but they brought hope to that community. What do we want to do when someone's suffering? We want to get a beautiful card, right? We want to send them flowers, because in that beauty, in that creativity, we are giving hope. Think of our world. In the current state it is, whether you think it's horrible or wonderful. What if all of the creatives were just creating beautiful things and weren't caught up in the fears and the sales and in the other things? How quickly would our world turn around? Just because there would be hope again. That's the power you have as a creative. Use it wisely, but oh my gosh, use it, please. So my journey on this, figuring out what else I can do, painting was always something that I thought that'd be fun to try. But my experience with painting was 2 hours in a bottle of wine, you know. Oh, it's there. So a couple of years ago, I bought a paint by number. They're really cool, these big paint by number canvases, you know, and I'm filling it all in, and I'm not very patient, and I'm a, well, it's good enough kind of person. So it looked okay, but it wasn't great. So one morning I woke up and I thought, I wonder if I could actually paint that picture. And I started, and in 2 hours I was still painting. And in 4 hours I thought, I'm kind of tired, but I'll come back to it tomorrow. And I realized that I started a process. I've never been a process person. I've been, here's the beginning, here's the end, let's get there as quickly as possible. Something had changed in me. I was understanding process. I came back the next day, did a little bit more, came back the next day, fixed a few things. Like for a week, I worked on one picture. I was blown away. But it was a process that I was starting to understand. It's not a quick turnaround. You have to stay with it. And then the poetry was another thing. I thought, oh, I should try that. And I went after, and I've been working on it, and I've been improving on it. Someone said, you should do a book of poetry. And I said, well, I only have 20. So it's going to take me a long time to get enough poetry to do that. But it's another outlet. It's different than writing a fiction story. I think when we start seeing our creativity, we start seeing everything we do as creative. I've been married 42 years, and about 5 years ago, I realized I hate cooking. I've done it for 38 years. I've done it for a family. I was over cooking. This year, I've fallen in love with it again because it's creative. I'm seeing it as a creative process, that I can make something that didn't exist before. I can make it look nice. I can make it look ugly. I can make it taste wonderful. And there's this new just energy and actually excitement about cooking that I never thought I'd have. Gardening is another one. The idea that you go out and you can create a beautiful garden, that's impressive. It's another creative outlet. We eventually start seeing everything that we do as creative. And life becomes really fun at that point. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Caffeinated. It was 20 years experience in the coffee industry. I worked for Caribou Coffee out of Minneapolis. The coffee industry is just this wild, crazy ride. The customers are wild and crazy. The employees are usually very artistic with very little business sense. So they're like all over here. And it's fast paced. It just was a great, great career. And I thought, I want to write a book about it, but I really don't want to write a book right now. So I took a weekend and I just wrote down a bunch of stories. And I put it in a drawer. And I think it was 5 years later, I pulled it out. And I was so grateful I had done that, because I had, in that 5 years, I had forgotten an awful lot of those stories. So I wrote a book. And then I was sitting with a friend and I said, you know what, I really think Caffeinated could be a series for TV. And he went, oh, who's working on that? I said, I don't know, and I don't really want to learn about it. And he went, oh, it's my dream to write that. I went, all right, you go for it. And he called me one day and he said, what do you think of a musical? I'm like, as a TV series, I don't think that works. But I hung up the phone and I went, but it would work on stage. It could be a play. And I sat down and started writing it. And I'm like reading about how do you format this? How do you format a play? That's the hardest part. Is where does the actors, and then you have this. And anyways, we got done with it. And then I found out you have to do things called table reads. So I pulled family in and we did a table read, and that's where they read it and you listen and then you make edits to it. And then I pulled family in again and said, can we do it one more time? Because I made some changes and they came in. It was great. And then I got really gutsy and I called some friends and I said, hey, I got this script. Can we go read? Would you come over and just read it? And they did. And I listened and they were laughing. And at the end, they were crying. I went, I got something here. I wrote a play. So what are we going to do with that? We put it on stage. We got through rehearsals 2 weeks before rehearsals. The woman who had the lead backed out. So we went home crying because this was my dream. We had 3 choices. We could cancel, we could postpone, or I could step in and play the lead. Now, I'm not an actress. I haven't ever done it before. People were saying, oh, but you know the character. I know the words of the character. It's different than acting. And so I went to bed, we're not going to do this. It's not going to happen. But I woke up the next morning with a question ringing in my head. But if you don't do it, who's going to tell the story? So I did it with 2 weeks rehearsal and a bunch of rewrites to make it as simple as possible. And 200 people came to see it. 2 years ago, writing a play was nowhere in my world, my universe. Being in a play was nowhere in my life. But I learned so much from that process. And since I have 3 more plays who have gone through the table reads and they've got it, I just need to find casts to put it on. That's the creative process. It takes you places you had no idea you were going. My last story is 2 years ago, my husband and I went to a jazz club up in Santa Cruz called Kumbra. Now they claim that's Swahili for spontaneous creativity. Don't you want to live in spontaneous creativity? But we walked in and the place was nothing special, except it was really special. And I thought, I want one of these here. I just want one of these places here. And so one day I was actually driving around Grover, like in like the industrial area, if Grover has an industrial area. And I'm thinking, oh, what would it take? A warehouse and then the money and then, but if it doesn't succeed, and then I walked into this room and I went, it's here. It exists. And we started a crazy little thing called Congregation House, where that little alcove turns into a really cool stage. And we serve food, and we get our alcohol license, and we serve wine. And we did last March, we did our first concert, and 100 people showed up. Like, what? And we thought, we have something here. We did Caffeinated here. 200 people showed up. Then we did another concert, which was just kind of this mess of a concert, and 80 people walked through the door, and they were here an hour early so they could get food and drink, and it just was this community of things happening. And on Saturday night, the cast from Caffeinated came back to do a murder mystery dinner theater. And we sold out. And we have the paperwork for the nonprofit called Congregation House Productions sitting on my piano at home. Never in a million years was that in my plan. But it's there. And we just keep taking steps. So I'm going to end with a story. I'm going to set a stage for you because that's what I do now. I write plays. I've always been fascinated with the idea of walking on water. Now, I don't know who thought about this in the very beginning, and I'm guessing there's 100 stories out there. The one I'm familiar with is the one I heard as a kid, and it's the one of Peter in the Bible. So setting the stage, we've got this guy called Jesus over here, who's doing really weird and crazy, wonderful things. We have his small group of friends here who are kind of following him and hanging out. And he says, you go on, get in the boat and go. I'll catch up. Now, my first thought is, how are you going to catch up? Like, you got a motorcycle, you're going to meet them? I don't know. But they get in the boat and they're happy and everything's wonderful. And then a storm comes through. Now, in the Midwest, I have watched many storms come across lakes. It's like watching the marine layer come in, except there's lightning and thunder and wind and rain. So it does catch them off guard. Well, now the guys in the boats are going, we're going to die, we're going to die. Jesus, help us, we're going to die. And he starts walking out on the water. Now, you can argue all day whether this is true or not. And I say you can argue because I love the story. And now they see him and they think he's a ghost. Oh my gosh, now we're going to die from the storm and a ghost is going to come and get us. Except for one person who looked out at Jesus and said, can I do that? Jesus said, yeah, come on, let's go play. And he got out of the boat. And then he took a step and he took another step. But then the wind hit him and the wave came up and he looked down and he realized he wasn't standing on anything and he went under. Jesus walks over and takes his hand, pulls him up, says, Peter, you are doing it. You had it. You just lost focus. The reason I tell you that story is because I think there's two different people in this group. Those who are still stuck in the boat. And I encourage you to get out of the boat. But then there's those that are doing crazy and wonderful things. And there's people watching saying, can I do that? And it's your job to say, yeah, come on, let's go play. But then you have to stay close because they will go under. And it's your job to reach down and pull them out and say, you had it. You were doing it. You just lost focus. Let's do it again. I leave you with that.
Questions?
Yeah. Yeah, we did good.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Any questions, comments, concerns you can write down and leave in the box. Yes.
I have a question. First of all, that was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
There are many threads to that it's for myself, what I needed to hear.
Good.
And I'm very curious if you feel comfortable sharing it in the moment that you actually started to call yourself a writer. What was that shift for you?
I forced myself.
But I mean, was there an event or was
No.
there
It had been,
one random Tuesday, you just decided you were going to call yourself a writer?
I think it was the doctor's office. It was the first time I made light of what I do and I felt sad.
Mm-hmm.
It was this, oh, wait a minute, you don't get it. You don't understand what this is. But the book also, The Artist's Way, if you haven't done The Artist's Way, do The Artist's Way. I listened to it again. There was so much in there that clarified for me what creative is. And the mistakes that I truly, the biggest mistake I've made is sharing things with people that I shouldn't have shared with. And they just tear you apart, even in the slightest little comment, you know, they don't think they're doing it. But I think putting those things together and then thinking, I guess, deciding I just want to own it. I just want to be a writer. So it was a process.
I think Karen may have, does Karen have a question now?
She says, thank you so much for the
Oh.
inspiration.
No, I don't trust you.
Damn, you know me too well. Okay, I'm working on this thriller. And I'm just wondering if other people have the same experience I have. They picked the damnedest times. My characters, they attacked me in the shower. I can't write stuff down in my shower.
I know.
And it really PO'd because they want to get that point out, you know. I wonder if other people have that experience of your characters coming and getting you, whether you want them or not. Yeah,
I think so.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the dilemma. How am I gonna remember this? Like in those thoughts during the night, like you can have a whole scene planned out. Like, oh, I'll remember this, and you wake up in the morning. I have no clue where they were, what they were talking about.
Hmm.
I know.
One point which I think is very important for writers. I spent, along with Mary, a long time in a writing group with Susan Tuttle.
Yes, Susan.
And it was incredible. Because Susan would throw something out at you and you would have to make something of her challenge in that moment. And I learned so much about writing and about myself and about my characters,
Yeah,
you know. But a good writing group or critique group is just
Yeah.
invaluable.
very much so. Again, know your critique group, know where they're coming from, and know what the audience of your book is.
Hmm.
Like if you're writing for a 15-year-old, you got to make that clear if you've got 60-year-old people critiquing it. Like they have to be able to transition over and go, can I think like a 15-year-old? Is this going to talk to a 15-year-old? So you do have to be selective. Yes.
I would like to comment on the remembering what you have thought about in the middle of the night. I was playing with this for many years and I would bring a notebook to bed and I couldn't read my handwriting in the morning. But I made a discovery, a technological discovery that changed my life.
Yeah.
You can get it into your cell phone.
Isn't that wonderful?
Bring your cell phone to bed with you. You got an idea, check it in your cell phone. You won't lose it.
You won't lose it. And you can read it in the morning.
You can read it.
Let me quickly delete it.
Really?
Really?
You might lose your partner.
Somebody on the other side of the fence.
Question, we're talking about flow.
Yeah.
And how you get into the flow when you're writing a story, you're writing, whatever you're doing, whatever you're creating.
Yeah.
But then if your flow gets interrupted, any suggestion?
You know, that's usually the busyness of our life. And that's something else. It's again, putting that protection in. So my friend Cara knows this about me. Talking about flow in my mind, flow is a person. She's very real. And part of the artist way is you do your pages every morning. And I got in the habit at the end of those pages saying, Flo, you're in charge of today. I'm just following them. And I do that. The dinner that we did on Saturday, and it was plated, like this was a big deal. We plated for 50 people and served, and it all went well. And at the end, the guy that was cooking with me, I said, this is probably a good time to tell you I've never done this before. He went, me neither. But I started that day going, Flo, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna follow. But it's a personal. You can't get thrown off. You take things as they come. You sift through them. Do I need this? Do I not need this? The thing I learned about caffeinated, I don't ever want to act again. I got off the stage after the first one and went, oh crap, I have to do this 5 more times. There was no I am not an actress. I can check that. I'm not going to try again. I know that. It's sifting through and just finding your way. But the wonderful thing about flow is tomorrow everything starts fresh. So just go to bed. My sister says it all the time. I just need to take a nap and it'll all be new when I wake up. Exactly. Just take a nap, go to bed.
About perfectionism.
Yes.
I
My
have a
favorite
technique.
topic.
And my technique is, I make sure that the first draft is awful.
Good for you.
I don't give a damn about the spelling or the grammar
Good
or
for
even
you.
the word choice. I just want to get it on paper.
Get it on.
Because I believe more than anything else in life, you can't edit nothing.
Exactly.
That's true.
That's a good quote.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Nothing.
Stephen King says that first draft you write with the door closed. Nobody else needs to see it. It's just yours. And you can do whatever. Perfectionists get in the problems. They can't even do that because that first page has to be perfect. It just stops. It stops the flow. It stops the creative process. Yeah, it's much easier to live with. Oh, it's good enough. Until you have to have a finished product and you go, oh, maybe it wasn't good enough. No, I have to be a perfectionist. Any other questions? Well, it's been lovely spending time with you guys tonight.
Thank you so much. You're so inspiring, really.
Well, thank you.
Making us feel better.
You should feel better. You're creatives. You are a special breed. Thank you. I've been forgetting to end the meeting, so I'm ending the meeting now. But have some snacks, and if you would help